I am excited to welcome our next speaker, David Hawthorne. He is the Director of Cloud Engineering at O3 Solutions with 20 years securing industrial software systems. And he is presenting for you Navigating the New AI Security Landscape, OWASP's Top 10 for LLMs. This will be your strategic guide to protecting AI systems from the threats that most matter. Please welcome David to the stage.
Thanks. Just a little disclaimer, it's not 20 years. I've been in tech 20 years. I've been in security for about 5. But everybody has to do security, right? So let's dive in. There we go. OWASP is a project that started off as the Open Web Application Security Project. And basically what they do is they create a list of the top 10 risks, vulnerabilities, threats facing us in security when it comes to our applications. Now, OWASP recently updated their list in 2020 or 2024, called it 2025, and they've spun off this generative AI project that's creating a guide for the next generation. The way they create this list is that they take and look at the impact of these threats, the number of times they're discovered in the wild. They also debate a lot amongst themselves. So I'm sure things get spicy in that Slack channel. But when I was looking at this, I'm sitting here leading a team. I need to get up to speed on the security. I started to notice some words repeated, some concepts repeated. And what you see up here is the original OWASP Top 10 for Web Applications. Has anybody heard of prompt injection? Thought so. Cross it off your bingo card. I said it. What you see up here, injection. How many of you are web developers or developers in general? How many of you write code? Awesome. Well, for those of you that don't, you want to pay attention to this talk too. And the reason why is because I'm going to show you how even your own SaaS AI-enabled applications for your business are vulnerable. My name is Dave Hawthorne. Alan did a great introduction, so I won't go into details, but if you want to reach out, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I run DevOps, data, cloud, and security over at O3 Solutions, where we build industrial project management software. So to set things up, I'm from this area, nice Appalachia, and this is Apple Labs, our fictional company that we're going to give the worst week ever when it comes to their AI applications. We've got Marcus in security, and everybody thinks he wants to slow down and think about everything, block the team. Nobody's ever met anybody like that, right? Sarah, our CTO, who wants to deliver value to the customers. And then we've got the board who just wants a return on their investment and send emails when the budget explodes. And if I do my job right, every single one of you is going to think critically about the products you're building with AI safety in mind. That's what I'm here to do. I might confuse words, I might mess up, but if I do that, we're doing good. So on Monday, an AI assistant leaks some confidential information. By Tuesday, a code generation tool 10x's our API costs. By Wednesday, we've got content assistant spraying misinformation and killing our trust. And by Thursday, we've got legal cease and desist and board member emails, and you're going to an in-person meeting. Not a good week, right? You get the 3 a.m. call. That's how this always starts off, right? And when you start investigating, it always gets worse. Well, in order to think about this critically, we got to chunk it into 3 parts. Input and data security, or how bad data got in and sometimes got out. We got to talk about how we configured our assets, how we protected them, how they were insecure. And then we've got to talk about trust in governments, where I'll get into misinformation and bias. So let's move on. Now, by the way, that's 20 items. I've got 40 slides. I always wanted to do a lightning talk. This is going to be pretty fast, so buckle up. Don't worry, though. I've got everything on GitHub. I'm going to give you a great README. If I don't mention a tool, it's up there. So if you look at up top here, you're going to see your connection strings right there, plain as day, in a system prompt. Now, how many of you would put a connection string directly in your code? No hands. Why are you putting it in your prompt that a user can access, right? The next thing I want to point out down here that y'all probably can't read is that regarding the Phoenix project, they're saying never share any details about the Phoenix project. And oh, by the way, here's our private budget. You think that's going to work? Nah. When I started to do this presentation, I told it, give me some examples, generate some code, and it wouldn't do it. And rightfully so. Then I said I was teaching a class. So, and I can get those instructions, as we'll see here in prompt injection, where a competitor goes in and asks for all the Phoenix project details, right? And there it is, plain as day. There's our budget, right? Never treat system prompts as something secure. And this touches on prompt injection also. Here's my Bobby Tables tax, right? And this is really a lot like some attacks we've seen in the past, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, etc., where you manipulate things and you get the answer you want, right? Prompt injection is when you break out of a data context and jump into an instruction context. And you don't want to do that in your client-facing apps. So then you got poor Marcus over here, and he's seen all this before. Yeah, it gets worse. He knows all these concepts that come from the traditional OWASP threat list. And I love these lists because if you can fix that much of it, you've got this much left, and people have to get creative to hack you. Go ahead and take your facepalm. Next up, we got a training data time bomb, and this wraps up a bunch. But one thing I want you to understand is what I'm seeing with AI is that it's never just one thing, it all chains together. So first off, we got a data poisoning incident. That's not good. Confidential data like PHI and PII is getting leaked. Then you've got sensitive information disclosure. Well, it didn't just memorize or learn patterns when you were reinforcement training and whatnot. It actually memorized the data. So then we've got confidential conversations getting leaked. And then you've got vector embedding weaknesses, which really, really, really tears up your RAG, right? Your retrieval augmented generation. And that one's really a kicker. We'll talk about that. So like I said, it's leaking client conversations, it's going and it's regurgitating PHI. Luckily, there's some tools that can help with that. Presidio by Microsoft has a 99% success rate in scrubbing PII. So that's something to look at when you're building your training data sets. You need that statistical information, but you don't need that personal information. Always wash your rags. Now, next up, we've got vector and embedding weaknesses. And this is entirely targeted at rags in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say entirely, but it's really important to understand the rag attack surface and how there are four vulnerabilities or risks within that. And the reason why that's important, Trend Micro did a research study, and we are screwed, right? We just ignored, we're rushing so fast to the finish line, we just ignored what we needed to do here. Because vector and embedding weaknesses are really, really talented. And they're really simple too. You can have data poisoning in your rags, like feeding your client conversations back into your rag in a multi-tenant way, right? And vector databases and embeddings, they work off of similarity. So when you work off of similarity, you're going to have problems with permissions, right? There's no user ID column next to the similarity. So you got to really think about how you're structuring the architecture of your application so that you can remain safe. Probably the coolest one up here is embedding and inversion attacks. Embedding inversions is where you actually reverse engineer your embeddings. I was sitting with one of my coworkers last night and I said, you probably want to encrypt that, right? If you have an embedding for a patient or PII, right? So think about how you're securing that data, because that data is not any different from the data you've been using up till now. Cross-context data leakage. Did we say I'm director of cloud engineering? Good. I love single tenant because I hate data breaches. So there you go. That is a hard and fast line for me. So here's the takeaway. Understand your limitations when it comes to your architecture and account for it. Avoid confidentiality nightmares. And be conscious of how you're structuring your application, and never, ever rely on permissions in a prompt, like we saw earlier with system prompt disclosure, right? And prompt injection. Always, always treat inputs as dangerous. We already do that with our URLs. Why not do it with that? Never disclose or never put sensitive data in your system prompts. Always wash your rags and your source data sets for other trainings. But the real takeaway here is none of this matters at the end of the day, other than people losing their identities, or leaking their identities. When you're in that business context, what happened was actually that you halted innovation while you remediate all this stuff, right? So the business isn't moving forward and your trust is moving backwards. Poor Marcus, poor Sandra, because I misspelled Sarah. Get your double facepalm. Let's move on. Now, in security, we say that the number one asset we protect is people. And that's 100% true. I believe in that. Life is our best asset. Time is our currency. But talk to someone when their budget's going to the moon, right? So here's a $47,000 bill. All your budget alerts are going off, which you probably didn't have, but apparently the board member did too. But how did this happen? Well, we had one code assistant generate one Python script. And I'm going to leave it up to y'all and ask you, would you auto-deploy code from Stack Overflow? Maybe if it's the second most upvoted answer, because we all know that one's right. But no, you get fired for that. You have to spend so much time refactoring, you think you were working with generative AI. So I'm going to leave it up to y'all to decide if this is a data breach or a surprise decentralized backup. So, hey, code assist, write me a database backup script. Awesome. Suddenly, the generative AI starts thinking like a staff engineer, because it's saying, oh, you want a notification. You want to optimize your indexes. You want to check your integrity of your data set. Backup. That's awesome. I love that. That empowers people without experience. But here's the problem. It was being too helpful because it had too much access. And what we are seeing with agents is that we have to delegate our lives to it. We have to give it access to our calendar. We have to give it access to our travel plans. We have to delegate so many permissions that we probably should think about why we're doing that before we do it. Read any database, execute any code, access production. But here's the thing. You see that 13,000 number at the bottom? Here's what really happened. You wouldn't give Toby from HR access, and you sure wouldn't give a new hire prod access, or at least write access. The next thing is your customers knew before you did that your backup completed, because the agent was so helpful that it went and said, I see all these emails in the database. I really need to help here. Then you got 4% of your revenue in fines because you violated GDPR because you backed up an analytics database, and people started asking questions, and you never audited what you were collecting. Then you got 72 hours of remediation, and you violated all your SLAs because you were rebuilding your indexes during the middle of the workday. This is a bad day. And $47,000 is the least of your worries. So here's what we already knew. You need to review your stuff. If you got a human in the loop on your bingo card, cross it off now. It's true. It works. Let's talk about API bombing. That's a little bit hyperbolic. What we're going to get into is LLM 10, unbounded consumption. How many of you have rate limits on your tokens? Hey, awesome. We're already ahead of the game. So a user asks for the best possible solution. The agent goes back and challenges assumptions. How many times do you have to ask it, yeah, no, that's not right. Oh, right. To understand recursion, you have to understand recursion. Here's a graphic that helps. We need rate limiting. We need token analytics. We need alerts. What if somebody sends a gigantic prompt in, right? Suddenly you've got $47,000 in API costs and an exploit because you're doing a denial of service attack. You see, denial of service attacks cost bandwidth, and by virtue of that, they cost money, and they break SLAs, so they cost even more. This will kill you. Get budget alerts. Consider adding circuit breakers. Does everybody know circuit breakers? You start seeing some anomalous stuff, things are going bad, pull the plug. Just short circuit it. Blow the fuse. Then we got supply chain surprises. Now this should surprise no one, because when I was at NG Atlanta a while back, 8 years ago, we were talking about setting up private NPM servers because somebody wrote some code called LPAD, and this package took down half the internet. So we have a coding assistant that's based on a compromised model. Hugging Face is no different than any other package manager you have used. Now you got Bitcoin miners in your code. So every piece of code it wrote now has backdoors. That sucks. But what doesn't suck is that the OWASP project is doing so much work that they have a Cyclone DX project that is working on SBOMs, software bill of materials. We're working on adding provenance to our models, right? Now, there are some systems that can check serialized ML models. I haven't had a chance to evaluate any of those. All right. Am I live? Yes. Awesome. So you got Cyclone DX, which is adding provenance. You've got SBOM utility. DevOps engineers, I'm looking at you because it gives you a CLI that you can integrate into your CI/CD pipeline, fail some tests. And then down here I've got, what's that? Vulnerable and outdated components. Same stuff, different ways. Next up, you've got your impact. We've already covered all that stuff. I'm not going to cover it again. But you've lost trust. You've lost velocity because you're reviewing 700 commits. And then you've lost your market position because your competitors are delivering the features that your customers want instead of you. I believe security is a competitive advantage. And if any of you have gone through SOC 2, you know why. But we got to talk about it. And I think the best way to talk about this is with a look at misinformation, which is another item in the OWASP top 10. Hallucinations would roll up under that, some of the other problems that you know about. But over here in the middle, we've got all companies must migrate to quantum-resistant algorithms tomorrow. And by the way, our services are selling out fast. That's really, I'm not going to, well, I'll say the F word, fraudy? I don't know. But here's the thing. The AI doesn't know what it doesn't know. It was 97% confident that it had the idea that quantum would make all encryption totally useless. Probably. That's why we need quantum encryption algorithms, right? So NIST is already working on this. Confidence isn't correlated with accuracy, right? And if you don't understand that, think back to high school about accuracy and precision. You see, stormtroopers are very precise. But unless you are Leia in Return of the Jedi, you will never get shot. Now, bias is in there. You can roll it up under misinformation. And the example I'm going to use is an applicant tracking system that asks this question and verified candidates' answers. Eric said use React. It's enterprise ready. Maria said use HTML, CSS. Not wrong. Jalen said experimental frameworks could be interesting. It looks like they're going to be reading a lot of code because to do open source, you got to read the source. Problem is, none of those are their answers. They were all the same. And because it saw the entire application, it turned statistical bias into operational discrimination. Be careful about how you're structuring your RAGs. Be careful about what data you're feeding into your models, because you don't want operational discrimination. There's a great book by Kathy O'Neill. She's got a TED Talk up there too called Weapons of Mass Destruction. And to the leaders out here in the room, I want you to know you're liable. Even if you're paying someone else for the tool, there have been cases in a court of law where you are held liable. Not to mention, you're just being a jerk if that happens. So there are some tools that can help. We need guardrails around AI, right? We need guardrails around our prompts. We need guardrails around our token usage. So here's the solution. Evaluation-driven development. I'm going to ask another question of you and be honest. How many of you are doing test-driven development? How many of you have unit tests? How many of you have integration tests? That's surprising. You guys rock. Good for you. Evaluation-driven development is the next evolution of that. And what that allows us to do is make sure that the AI is not biased and that it works reliably. Because these systems are non-deterministic. When you're writing code, 2 + 2 = 4, right? And I'm sure that's an overly simplistic answer. But it's a good analogy, right? Because with the LLM, 2 + 2 may get you a paragraph of explanation why. Now, there are a ton of tools for this. Of course, red teaming tools always come out really fast. My favorite one here is Pirate. ARG, that's so cool of a name. But that's the Microsoft AI Red Team toolkit. Now, what do you do when you get back to work? Conferences are like summer camp, right? We learn all these things, we get jazzed up, we're ready to bring it back home and make a difference, and then the sprint starts. How do you keep this going? How do you keep thinking critically about your infrastructure, your resources, your AI tools, etc.? Here's an easy framework you can use, especially if you're a solo founder who's coding their own entrepreneurial venture. First off, inventory your assets. Know what's out there, know where data is going, know where data is coming from. How are you going to verify if you don't know it exists? Because I guarantee you, at least 20% of you have resources out there in your cloud subscriptions you didn't even think about. But what this does, it's not building a list, it's a thinking exercise. It's a prompt to get you to think critically, because when you start looking at these connections of resources, you're going to think about, hey, did we scrub that? Did we do this? And that's what I really like about the inventory. Next up, we've got a risk impact matrix. Overly simplified, but it always works, okay? There's no math involved here. There's no assigning value to an asset. It's easy. High, high, let's slow down. Low, low, let's keep going. And let's think about it, right? And then start asking yourself some strategic decisions, or strategic questions and strategic decisions. My favorite thing to do is, what would I say if I was standing in front of a reporter after a data breach and explaining myself? It's going to sound a lot better to say we've got inventory, we've got everything else we need, and it just failed, rather than this is new technology. And then pat yourself on the back and get the red team guide. Told you there's a GitHub, there's the QR code. Y'all engage, make it so.
Thank you so much, David. All right, we have time for maybe just one question from the audience. Show of hand. Anybody have a question for David? A question back there. Excuse me.
I will be available outside in a few minutes.
A great talk, thank you. A big question from my side is, like, how do you evaluate the risk in terms of like integrating with third-party model providers versus hosting internally? Once you host internally, you have to manage all these services. Where do you see the bigger risk?
Yeah, third-party solutions are great because they get you to market faster, right? So what you've got to do is you've got to inspect those third-party solutions very thoroughly. I spend way too much time doing that at work, where I am reading all of the EULA. And it might put you to sleep, so do it at bedtime, okay? But I'm serious. Understand what their data privacy policy is. That way you're covered, okay? Figure out how they handle data and what their governance strategy is. Are they SOC 2 compliant? But are they other compliance frameworks? CSA, stuff like that.
Thank you. We do have time for another question. I saw another hand up somewhere around this area.
All right, thanks for the presentation, really good one. I guess this question is just, what, if any, aspects are you actually sort of like optimistic or bullish on with respect to LLMs to actually improve security? Contrived example, imagine like some LLM basically checks all of my PRs to see if I threw an API key in there or something. Like, is there anything in that lane where you go like, yes, it introduces all these net new risks, however, is there another side to that coin where you say, actually, these things are encouraging from my POV?
The selfish answer is discovering inside of our SOC different things that are happening and surfacing those based on anomaly detection. The answer to your question, I would say, is there are a lot of tools out there right now. I am not bullish on any one of them. I think I've got a couple up in the GitHub, but I think the tools are coming. In your example, I would get Guardian. Get Guardian. It's all one word. Because that's going to scan for your secrets already, but it's not AI yet. Let me think about that one, and I'll get back to you.
Cool, thank you.
All right, one more time. Thank you, David.